Alrighty, hello everyone. It's been a week since Sanctum was released and about half a year since I released literally anything. So here I am to bitch about the current league, because that's sort of what I do. I myself have been playing an RF Juggernaut for League Start, which, if I haven't already, will be releasing an abridged guide on that soon. It's been going exceptionally well, and overall I really do believe that 3.20's overall changes have been a solid improvement compared to 3.19. So honestly, the fact that Sanctum is kind of the only thing I have to complain about is actually really good news. But let's get into my Sanctum feedback. So the Forbidden Sanctum purports itself to be a roguelike inspired game mode in the vein of titles such as Hades, The Binding of Isaac, Dead Cells, etc. You choose from a selection of floors that provide some objective and then get a reward at the end, with rooms giving you a variety of either positive or negative effects. Throughout this, you can find relics to make future runs easier, as well as get rewarded with regular PoE currency alongside sanctified relics which affect your character outside the run. In general, running a room is a very quick endeavour. While doing regular maps, you'll find a portal that gives you the suck, bringing you into the Sanctum where you choose a room and go from there. Or you can choose to store the room to do up to 8 of them all at once later on. Overall, the game mode doesn't really feel much different than just playing regular PoE. You go in, you kill shit, you get your loot. Easy, right? However, you're gated by a resource called Resolve. Rather than simply losing when your character dies, you lose Resolve when your character is hit. In general, combat is much slower in the Sanctum than it is in the rest of Path of Exile, as you face far less enemies at once and are heavily encouraged in learning their attack patterns to safely avoid being hit. This leads into the first major complaint I have, in that Sanctum is heavily anti-melee. Now, honestly, most of Path of Exile is anti-melee. Most games in general, really, since melee is melee. There's an inherent downside to willingly choosing to engage an enemy in close range when you could just, not do that. But Sanctum ramps up these issues to the extreme due to how the Resolve works. It doesn't matter how tanky you're built, if an ability passes through your character or you walk into a damage zone, your Resolve drops nonetheless. Evasion and block won't mitigate this either. Now obviously, the idea is to give the mode some meaningful challenge, given we can heal ourselves with flasks or life regen and whatnot, but what it mostly means is totems and minion builds will AFK behind a wall and still kill shit, whilst anything that relies on actually being near the target to kill them will disproportionately suffer. Resolve in general is pretty crappy because it doesn't scale outside relics. It doesn't matter how tanky you are, doesn't matter how evasive you are, or if you've got max block. An attack passing through your character lowers Resolve all the same. Simple as that. And the bar only gets bigger either through relics, which are basically non-existent, at least for me, or via the numerous buffs you can get, which are also non-existent. I understand that relics make the whole thing so much more palatable, but the randomness of their acquisition is fucking awful. Just keep dying on floor 1 until the game gets better is legit the reason I couldn't get into Rogue Legacy. I love roguelikes. I don't like ones designed around grinding arbitrarily until it's suddenly good. Note here that I'm only talking about the relics which improve your performance in the Sanctum, and not sanctified relics, which are the chase item of this league and can boost your character outside the Sanctum too. Those obviously should be pretty hard to find. The fact is, nobody likes to play a game where they get weaker as they progress, especially in a roguelike. Especially in a game that was literally inspired by roguelikes, a genre built on the idea of equal exchange. That is, as the levels get more challenging and enemies tougher, so do you. Forbidden Sanctum just doesn't do this though. You are far more likely to enter a room that'll debuff you than find a useful buff, and even when you do find a buff or a fountain to restore Resolve, you have to spend the Aureus, the Sanctum currency, to get it. I've found that each floor tries to alternate between positive rooms and negative ones. Negative rooms give afflictions, whilst positive rooms give either Aureus, a boon buff, or a fountain that heals Resolve, or a merchant. The variance here is the issue, as some of these rewards are far more beneficial at any given point than the others, whilst afflictions are weighted largely on how bad the affliction is. That is, you never really want an affliction, obviously, and getting a crap load of coins but no boon fountains or merchants just feels bad. It doesn't help that some of the afflictions are just downright run-breaking. Enemies having more life and damage? Yeah, sure, why not, that's fine. Losing all your Aureus coins when a room ends? Yeah, fuck off. Getting a guaranteed affliction every 2 rooms, but only getting a measly handful of coins as your positive is demoralizing. You don't even start the room with a boon. The first room always gives you Aureus coins, which is only useful if you can find a merchant, which itself is not guaranteed. Merchants, however, are fucking amazing and totally worth getting the coins for, and my most successful runs have generally all been trying to target merchants specifically. It's just that it is heavily gated behind RNG, which, I mean, to be fair, is at least pretty true to roguelikes. Then there's the off-screening issues. Having enemies just casually smack you when they're not even within visual distance, when you've never even seen them before, has always been bullshit. And the ability for players to do it on certain builds has never been a compelling reason to keep it in. Lots of builds don't get this benefit, but still get shafted by enemies who can. Personally, I'd rather they just remove off-screening for both players and enemies entirely. Either that or let us zoom the fuck out more, because honestly, that'd be a pretty damn good band-aid if nothing else. Not being able to properly see the enemy as they telegraph their attacks is incredibly frustrating, which is really disappointing because the enemies actually telegraph their attacks really well. Coupled with this is the long-standing problem GGG has with visual clarity. Difficulty should not be tied to the ability to actually see my enemy's attacks, and many times the ground blends in with some of the more annoying ones way too much. And all of this without mentioning the loot. Because to me, honestly, the loot is ancillary if the mode itself is fun. World of Warcraft proved you could implement a roguelike style activity in a game not inherently built for it and make it an absolutely engaging and entertaining way to play. They called it Torghast. Torghast was far from perfect. It lacked variety and the game pressured you into doing it way too often for tangible benefits, but conceptually it was executed quite well for what it was. The Forbidden Sanctum is not particularly fun and only truly rewarding if you can do an entire 32-room run. You can sort of get away with only having one of these, but to have neither is a hard sell. In general, the Sanctum works best once you're so geared you no longer need to run it. If you can consistently get to floors 3 and 4, then it'll pay out rather well for the relatively limited time spent. But you need millions of DPS to do this and the right build, totems and summon raging spirits being popular options. As is the case with most of PoE, the best defense is a strong offense. If you simply destroy an enemy in less than a second, they'll have no time to attack you to begin with. Hell yes! Now look, I'm all for doing a league mechanic just for the fun of it, but Sanctum just isn't fun for me on its own, because it lacks the same variance and game-changing elements most roguelikes have. The buffs in actual roguelikes mostly just increase damage too, sure, but increasing your damage through some crazy proc spam a la Risk of Rain or Gunfire Reborn is far more exciting than just giving you a flat 50% boost to damage. Really, if I have to do so much damage I no longer need the rewards at all, then I'd rather just skip it entirely. If relics are more common, I might be happier. Relics can be very powerful boons and are an absolute means to success, but they're pure RNG and acquisition in what you get from them. As far as I can tell, there's no real way to target them outside perhaps merchants. They drop randomly from pretty much anything, but bosses and merchants seem to be more likely. Running Sanctums without relics versus running with them is incredibly noticeable, but the grind to get them is just not enjoyable because Sanctum just isn't. Like, the reality is that Sanctum is just part of Exile. You go in, you kill shit, you get crap loot. Which is fine, but it's just so boring. The League was marketed as a roguelike, so I want a fucking roguelike. I want crazy, absurd shit. I want to see the entire room explode in glorious hellfire as I shit meteors out my juggernaut's ass. That's what a roguelike's about. Not just, oh, you get 50% more damage, but lose literally all your buffs at the end of the floor. Ha! Get fucked. Alright, so in conclusion, I feel that the Forbidden Sanctum is a cool premise executed poorly, which I guess can be argued about a lot of the recent League mechanics, unfortunately. If we ignore the difficulty issues, the core problem I have with Sanctum is it's just not crazy enough. Really, that's about the worst problem, honestly. It doesn't deviate from the core gameplay enough to stand out or make the struggle to grind it worthwhile. And honestly, I chalk this down to the 3-month development schedule. There's just no way GGG was ever gonna make a comprehensive and insane roguelike experience in such a small time. So I do admit that this does kind of feel like the best we were ever gonna get, which is just, it's just really sad. Honestly, Sanctum can actually be really fucking rewarding, but only if you can complete floors 3 and 4 reliably, which is very, very challenging for some builds and a complete face roll for others, with relics being the go-to way to compensate for those who struggle, but are just way too annoying to get. A few tweaks to resolve loss, off-screening enemies, and the acquisition of relics would go a long way to making the mechanic feel a lot smoother. As always, my name is MrTastix. If you like this video, then please consider subscribing, and I'll see you all next time.